Hey everybody, Roger Hurricane Wilson here. Thanks for joining me on my YouTube channel. Back in 2015, I decided to write a book, and I wanted to write it about some of my stories along the way. It was called Hurricane. It is called Hurricane, and it's available pretty much at most of the download sites, Kindle and Barnes and Noble. Also at my website at hurricanewilson.com. It's not a bestseller by any means. It's basically just the story. I think I more or less wrote it just so I wouldn't forget some of the stuff that happened along the way, and that's really what it is. And so a lot of folks have picked up with it because they know me and what I do, and they bought it for that reason. Other than that, it's not, like I said, it's not a bestseller by any means, but it's done okay. So anyway, I started doing an audiobook on it, and I'm going to probably come out with that sometime soon. But in the meantime, I've got a few of the edited chapters along the way, and I'm going to feature one here in this video. It's going to be chapter 1, and basically chapter 1 is all about taking guitar lessons. Basically, if somebody asked me how to describe this book, I described it as a 9-year-old kid taking guitar lessons, and then where the adventures led on throughout life through here where I'm sitting right here today. So this is chapter 1. It starts out as me as a kid taking guitar lessons, and unfortunately the chapter is it ends kind of sad, but it's just what happened along the way. So here it is, chapter 1 from my book, Hurricane. Chapter 1, Taking Guitar Lessons. Like many typical kids, I thought it would be really cool to play the drums. Having no idea what that entailed, it was an infatuation from the first grade. It was always a treat seeing the big kids in the Keansburg Public School band, especially the drummers, come in from the parade practice out on the streets surrounding the school. How cool would that be, playing the drums? My folks wanted no part of it. Another day in first grade, a guy with an accordion showed up in our school auditorium for a musical assembly presentation. It was George Johnson, the owner of the George Johnson Accordion Studio in Keansburg, New Jersey. He was there to promote his teaching operation, something that would see me doing the same thing in my own business many years later. He proceeded to play some songs for us, including the William Tell Overture. To us elementary school embryos, he actually rocked the house. It was only then that all of us kids in school that day unceremoniously learned that the Lone Ranger theme was originally a song of another name. As he performed, Mr. Johnson looked as though he thoroughly enjoyed playing the accordion. He really made it look easy and fun. At 6 years old, with no clue what he was doing or how, it sounded cool. A few years later, when this kid in my Cub Scout group told me he was taking guitar lessons, something rang familiar. When he mentioned the teacher's name, Mr. Johnson, I thought it might be the same guy from that school assembly in first grade. It was, but he never revealed that first day that he also played and taught guitar. Although my mom had always wanted me to play the piano, she agreed to let me take guitar lessons. Sometime later, she signed me up. It was exciting when the day arrived while in the 4th grade to begin my lessons at age 9 on January 7th, 1963. Here I was stepping into something new. The date is embedded in my mind since the teacher wrote the date on the first page of my first instruction book. The same Mr. Johnson from my first grade assembly then pulled a new beginner acoustic guitar out of the box and proceeded to set it up and tune it for me. Having owned a toy guitar that was given to me at age 4, I did have some idea on how to hold it. In addition, there were also memories of Elvis Presley playing his guitar in some of his TV performances. My first 45 RPM record at 4 years old was Elvis' Love Me Tender. Can't forget Tennessee Ernie Ford's 16 Tons that would be the gateway to my appreciating the blues style later on. The sound of the couple of chords he strummed totally intrigued me. I was basically mesmerized. What was alien to me was how to get any sound out of the instrument other than strumming the strings. When he showed me the notes on the first string, and that by pressing the first fret of the first string would give me that first F note, that was big stuff. Arriving home to begin practicing, my interest shifted from my assigned lessons to strumming partial chords and basically hacking on the guitar. With much trial and error, there were some familiar melodies that made it out by ear. Unlike many things in my short lifespan, music seemed to come easy for me. Poor old Mr. Johnson hated this. How dare I venture out on my own to explore the guitar? He would get downright angry with me at my next lesson for not having practiced fluently the material that he had assigned. In turn, there were times he made me so mad that I wanted to quit. Thankfully, my mom and dad wouldn't let that happen. My guitar lessons continued with Mr. Johnson for 4 years, accumulating a stack of books at least a foot high. A couple of trophies were even awarded to me at his yearly student recitals. I could read music, but in wanting to just play my guitar, it wasn't a pretty sight. At age 12, some friends of mine already had their own band together. They were playing rock and roll at some of our local school dances. It really distressed me that I couldn't do what they were doing. After all, they were playing bar chords. Those chords were the basis for rock and roll, and they were mandatory. These chords would help me pay the bills later in life. My dad agreed to let me take some lessons from another teacher at Dan's Music Center in Keansburg. According to some of the other local kids, this guy was rated as the cool teacher in town. He actually had a clue by showing me some stuff that would help me catch up to the real music world. This was more like it. Many years later, while teaching full-time in my own studio in Atlanta, my initial approach would begin by teaching each student how to read music. When it was realized that someone could be taught through less formal methods, such as learning songs or scales along with making it fun, that flexibility would be the foundation of any of my future success. Who knows whatever became of that second guitar teacher who taught me the songs I wanted to learn. Can't even remember his name. He just showed me how to think out of the box and the book. Many people make bigger marks than they ever realize. In 1999, while on tour in New Jersey, I wondered if George Johnson was still in business, or even still alive. Checking the Yellow Pages, an ad indicated that he was still operating his music instruction business. When I reached him by phone, he didn't seem to remember me, but he invited me to stop by for a visit. After negotiating my motorhome through his tight condo parking lot, while also carrying band members who weren't overjoyed by this type of stop, paying him a visit was something I had to do. We talked for a while, each of us noting that we obviously both looked very different. He was now elderly, and I was an adult. I'm still not sure if he ever actually remembered me, but he appeared to be trying. It was obvious that he wanted to. Maybe it was possible that he may have eventually, but for me, he appeared unrecognizable. The only thing that made me think that he was in there somewhere was because I'm the one that called him. Other than that, there was nothing familiar. In recalling the early days, he was always a pack rat. There had always been a lot of junk and clutter around his studio. Borderline hoarding. It was the same in this location. Stuff everywhere. It is really amazing how many things do change throughout our lives, but some other things just don't. After this visit, there was occasional and casual communication. George Johnson would remain on my promotional email list and regular greeting card list. At one point, he sent me an email asking for permission to use my promotional material, CDs, and pictures to tell his current students that one of his former ones may have done okay in the music business, that one being me. This story could have just stopped here. It probably should have, but it didn't. It wasn't that much of a concern at the time when a few of Johnson's emails bounced back. It could have been internet gremlins or a changed email address. His returned Christmas card due to no such address and unopened now raised a flag. Something was definitely wrong. By Googling New Jersey music teachers named George Johnson, a really distressing headline caught my attention. I was stunned for who knows how long. Middletown, New Jersey police say a longtime piano teacher made videotapes of students using his bathroom. George Johnson is charged with various counts of child endangerment. Police have identified 44 people from over 1,500 tapes ranging in age from 6 to 72. It was so shocking a story. It was surreal. After a period of sitting in front of my computer in disbelief and still shaking, I managed to find the phone number of the New Jersey District Attorney that handled the case. In actually reaching him on the phone at that moment on this day in 2004, I explained who I was and that I was a former student of Johnson's 40 years earlier. In speaking to the DA, now at age 51, I never remembered any sign of odd behavior toward me at any time. My question was, how does something like this happen? The lawyer's response was simple. It is difficult to determine what causes people to head down a wrong road, but at the end of the day, all we can do is deal with it as best we can with the evidence we are presented with. While that seemed like a typical response from an attorney, I could tell in his voice that he really cared about my shock and concern. He told me that he appreciated my calling him to ask about the case. Later word was that George Johnson eventually died in prison. In trying to wrap myself around this bombshell, even though George Johnson was never my idea of the best guitar teacher, this type of demise could never be wished upon anyone. At best, he could be described as a white guy with horn-rimmed glasses, wingtip shoes, and no musical soul. No doubt he could execute the musical mechanics and go through the motions of playing the guitar, but he never really impressed me. He didn't make it enjoyable. That was the reason for my escape to another guitar teacher just before my entrance into the teenage wasteland. To his credit, while he appeared to know nothing about playing for all the right reasons, he did teach me what I needed to know about music in order to eventually make a living. At some point during my time studying with Johnson, he took a vacation to get married. Leading up to that, he would share small talk and nightmare stories with my folks about lazy and incompetent contractors he was dealing with in building a new home a couple of towns over. He would later move his teaching business to the first floor of his new residence. Not really sure, but I don't recall taking but a few lessons there. There certainly weren't many before my moving on and eventually going away to school. Recalling that he was a devout Catholic, he evidently had in excess of 10 children. The DA handling the case said that most of them, if not all, were in the courtroom. He described them as appearing to be upstanding and respectable good people. My thoughts immediately turned sympathetic for them in trying to understand the unimaginable horrible experience they were having to bear. My heart was literally breaking for these people that I had never met. Unfortunately, there were no winners here.